At times like these, your greatest enemies can be your best allies. Now, really, think about it. They have spent a vast amount of time trying to pinpoint your weaknesses, use them against you. And now that a much greater enemy is at hand, you you form a temporary alliance that, as if, well, that you form a temporary alliance because you realize if you both get destroyed, you won't be able to do anything, and everybody just loses. So this temporary alliance is a better option given the circumstance. Both groups focus their efforts engaging the enemy from afar, hopes of destroying as many incoming ships as possible at long range before they made landfall. Um, well, um, but after a while, it became obvious that this was not going to work, as there was too many ships and they're starting to make landfall. As soon as the first wave ship made landfall, they disposed their troops and which flew around and ran around the city, causing more mayhem. Needless to say, both groups, along with the military, fully engaged at this point. Nyayo stayed at the riverfront to keep laying down as much fire on the incoming horde as possible, which proved to be a good choice because a ship showed up which caught her attention. Unlike the rest of the ships advancing toward the city, this one was just laying down there at a distance, hovering. It was odd, but after a few minutes it became whatever this ship was, it was very important. Now we gave it all to Sergo. And gave a call to Sergo to bring her special ammo. And in less than a minute, a giant walker showed up. Sergo's giant walker showed up and threw a large metal box next to her before running back into the city to smash, shoot, and stomp. Nyayo opened up and loaded the uh, ammo chain into her cannon, then braced it, as what these rounds were had quite a kick to them. Not even her power armor uh, could really brace the gun properly. And since the target was range, it's best to be as accurate as possible, as every round counts. After setting up, she took aim and fired full auto this time. This next scene I will be describing from the ship. On this ship was a woman who was feared and hated on a galactical level, Bequinta. I might have gotten that name wrong, since the piece of art I made for her was from several years ago, over a decade ago, and I tried to use fancy lettering, so it's hard to make out what I wrote, but I think that's as accurate as I can get it. She's a human traffic of galactical proportions. So she's not light. As soon as some of the rounds reached the ship, they ripped straight through, which was alarming to everyone because the ship had several magnetic fields dedicated to deflecting at least severely slowing these rounds. But somehow these ones were able to not be phased by it. The rounds were uh, ripping through the ship. McClintock got more and more frustrated the more damage the ship took. She was screaming at the crew to stop the attack, and then suddenly a round ripped through the control room wall, flew toward her, grazed her left cheek, and pierced the wall behind her into the cargo bay where it exploded. In the silence, everyone stopped and looked at her. She was quiet and looked annoyed before saying, "It's her. It's Nyayo. The bastard is still alive." The crew turned and looked at monitors, which showed the rounds flying at them from the harbor. McQuinty yelled, "Charge! Full throttle straight at her. I want her alive." And just like that, the ship flew straight at her, kicking a wall of water from the draft. Kicking up a wall of water from the draft. But now we cut back to the harbor scene. Nyayo is sucking through the ammunition at a quicker rate now, and as the ship is now that the ship is moving toward her, which set off an alarm gun indicating overheating. But at this point, the ship was more important. If the gun gets destroyed, it will most likely be worth it. Every single round was either ripping through the ship, or if it missed the ship and exploded in an effort to try to do damage to anything. Less than a kilometer from the shore, the ship took too much damage and crashed into our, having its momentum carry it further. and eventually crashing into the concrete shore. There was silence in the air. He moved out of the way of the crash, but kept eyeing the ship in silence. So there was only 7 rounds left in the cannon. So at this point, it's best to spend wisely. Suddenly, the hull opened. Bequinta climbed out to exchange looks of amazement. Neither expected to see other for some reason, yet here they were. Then, in quick motion, both pointed their guns at each other and fired. Nyayo sent a single round toward Bequinta, which missed but exploded behind her, resulting in a shockwave that threw her off the ship onto the concrete walkway. But she quickly jumped back on her feet and sprayed Nyayo with her hand-mounted light machine gun. Nyayo quickly switched her clothing, her power armor to armor, and which prevented these bullets from doing any damage. The two began an absolute fanatical battle in the streets. It was mayhem. The absolute sheer hatred for the other party was too evident to everybody. Meanwhile, the others were barely holding the line. Some were zigzagging between the streets, trying to hold off as much of the invasion force as possible. They're running low on ideas, energy, and ammo. But the invasion force could not get past the harbor. And on top of it, the same team invasion force had gotten through the portal. There's no more of them. At this point, the force started to panic, contacting Bequinta that they all need to retreat as the invasion force has failed. She was more than annoyed, but at this point she was being worn down. Masnia was looking more and more furious during the battle. Her cannon was out of ammunition, and she was resorting to using her 60 caliber pistol. Yes, 60 cal, which, although was smaller, it was proving to be much more effective than the cannon given the circumstances. After all, she reluctantly agreed and started heading toward the harbor during the battle, where one of the last heavy support battleships was waiting for her. I was too furious to see her plans, and what her plan was until she made a run for the ship, at which point she began simply unloading everything she had left in the pistol. But to no avail, the ship's shields managed to block most of the projectiles. Bequinta boarded, but not before taking one last look at her adversary, as if to make a mental note of what she looks right now. After all, who knows when and if they'll meet again. The ship bolted out of the harbor, headed through the portal with a few remaining vessels after it. Bequinta's personal vessels was left crashed into the shore. There was absolutely no time or resources to save it. Nyayo, this was her only chance to catch her, so she immediately called all her forces to board the spaceships and gave chase. She returned to Ichigo and rested and said, "Gotta go. This is more important it is far more important an opportunity to waste. She is far too dangerous to let go. If you don't help, fine. Just don't hinder us." Oh, and this battle we had, it's called a draw. Ichigo was overwhelmed by all these events and just nodded. She needed to figure out what the hell to do next before her decision evolves into another mess of a war or another conflict. Episode 55. Yes, there was an episode 55. The scene starts in Tokyo. The harbor is a mess. Emerging personnel from both Earth and the galaxy is helping out in the area. Engineers from the galaxy are scanning the attack vehicles used by enemy and paying particular interest in one particular that captured their attention. The lead ship shot down Manyayo. It looked particularly similar to a certain ship specially developed by our galaxy called the Pulsar. But it didn't take a long time to determine this was fake. Why is this important? Well, we only have 7 of these starships for the entire galaxy, and one was recently stolen. And the sheer amount of resources just to build the engine, and every one of these starships only needs one engine, which I will explain later. Well, this engine requires an entire solar system to be dedicated to building it. Not because it's so large, but because it's so dangerous. If anything goes wrong during manufacture, well, you need that much space to contain it. Anyway, Ichigo spent the day consulting the rest of the day new project, as well as the royal advisors. They came to the decision that it's best if they follow Nyayo and help catch Bequinta. After all, she is a human trafficker that has operation as an operation expanding to a few galaxies, and it's everyone's best interest to stop her. They packed up ready the small dedicated fleet to try and keep as low a profile as they can, whilst having enough resources to fight off anything that could come their way. Oh, and that Catwoman who is expected to Ishiko's sword, well, she went her own way. She has no allegiance to anyone but her father. Ishiko is barely keeping a tail on Bequinta, who keeps using the wormholes to skip ahead. The only problem is, as these wormholes collapse, they leave a very distinctive sound in real space, which is utterly inaudible to us, but can easily be detected with the right equipment. Every time she opens up a wormhole and exits the other side, she has to collapse it to prevent the chaser from catching up. The problem is this is leaving a telltale sign of where she is. Now is using regular space to travel, but has to travel at full throttle just to keep up. As for Ishigo, well, she's shadowing you. It occurred to her she should contact her, but chances are she might get defensive, as in Nyayo might get defensive, and there's a chance that Bequinta could also figure out that she's being followed by more people, which could make her unpredictable. During the journey, the Muse fleet got priority alarm for a small fleet, which was quite the ways away from their current position, but the alarm stated that our Milky Way galactical forces had found the missing pulsar starships. Since the engineers who inspected the one back on Earth, well, the one that they thought was a pulsar, were a bit skeptical. The crew was a bit skeptical. After all, their current mission was quite important, so they sent back a message to send evidence back to the forces. Sent an evidence to the forces. They demanded them to send enough proof that they had reasonable suspicions to believe this was indeed the real one. And boy, they got it. The series of photos and data readings from different machinery on board the ship that they received were really convincing. The engineers suddenly felt an urge to change course, but no one had the urge to say it, had the guts to outright say it. Ishiko consulted with everyone again and came up with an elaborate plan. They opened a wormhole between their fleet and the forces' fleet and traveled through to the site. The wormhole ended up in high orbit above a planet. Forces present there were ordered to keep the wormhole open whilst they returned. Ishigo's fleet landed on the planet next to the pulsar, which was parked and surrounded on the ground, and what looked like 3 pilots were standing outside, looking kind of scared. As they landed and disembarked, the engineers were the first to take off, and before the royal guard, heading straight for the pulsar starship, rushing past the pilots without much as a glance. The Muse, however, didn't ignore the pilots as they walked toward the ship, and the pilots looked kind of familiar, very familiar. Until Ishiko finally yelled, "Kesh?" Yeah, it's the aliens again. Kesh, Pite, and Tart. Now, free from the rule of Deep Blue, roaming the galaxy. The 3 guys look shocked as the Muse sure looks different, being freaking galactical royalty and all. They were dumbfounded, couldn't speak for the longest time until Kish finally broke the silence by bursting into her explanation why the hell they had a pulsar with them. Shigo calmed them down, assured them they were not in trouble for it. So it turns out the guys needed a ship after the final incident with Deep Blue back on Earth. The original ship had been really damaged, and they were in desperate need for another one. During the search, they stumbled upon a person who proposed several ships to them, including this one. The price was astronomical, and on top of it, they had to surrender the current ship as well. But it's a pulsar, and anyone who knows anything about it will want it. The guys debated heavily, but ultimately decided that on it.